contents that became unconscious have withdrawn all by themselves. They were not repressed, on the contrary.
There are people who seem to enter a room and quietly rearrange your inner world without touching a single object. One sentence from them can stay under your skin for hours. One habit, one tone, one smug expression, and suddenly your mind is no longer your own. You replay what they said, sharpen your judgment, build your case. It feels clean at first, almost moral. You tell yourself you are simply seeing them clearly. But hatred has a strange intelligence. It rarely fastens itself to a person for the reasons it claims. More often, it clings to them because they have brushed against something in you that was never meant to be seen. This is the disturbing edge of Jung's insight. Not that every flaw you notice belongs to you, and not that all criticism is projection, but that the qualities in others that emotionally possess you often reveal a buried relationship with yourself. Indifference is honest. Clear discernment is calm. But when your reaction is disproportionate, when someone's arrogance, weakness, neediness, vanity, dishonesty, or coldness seems to ignite something ancient inside you, the psyche may be showing you a secret in the only language it knows how to speak: disturbance. Jung put it with brutal simplicity. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, not because others are innocent, but because the emotional violence of our reaction is often a map. Most people never read that map. They stay at the level of accusation. They say, "I hate liars," while quietly lying to themselves every day. They despise selfishness while starving their own needs until resentment leaks out sideways. They condemn arrogance because they once had to amputate their own pride in order to be loved. The conscious mind prefers a flattering story. It wants to believe that what disgusts us in others proves our virtue. But the unconscious is not interested in virtue performances. It is interested in wholeness, and wholeness is expensive. It demands that we stop confusing our self-image with our actual nature. Jung believed that beneath the polished surface of personality, there exists the shadow, the disowned part of the self. Not evil in any simple sense, but everything the ego rejects in order to maintain its preferred identity. The shadow contains what is shameful, primitive, selfish, envious, aggressive, needy, frightened, sensual, and grandiose. But it also contains vitality, instinct, creativity, and power that were buried along with what was socially unacceptable. The tragedy is that what we refuse to confront within does not disappear. It waits. It leaks into mood, fantasy, attraction, contempt, and moral obsession. It enters life wearing someone else's face. That is why projection is so convincing. It allows the psyche to encounter itself at a safe distance. You do not have to admit your own hunger if you can be revolted by someone else's ambition. You do not have to face your own cruelty if you can build your identity around condemning the coldness of others. You do not have to reckon with your own capacity for betrayal if you can remain fascinated by the betrayals around you. Projection is one of the most elegant defenses ever designed. It protects the ego from contradiction. It preserves the persona, the social mask, the version of you that feels coherent, decent, and in control. But every mask has a cost. The more immaculate the persona, the darker and more reactive the shadow becomes. This is why the nicest people are not always the kindest. Sometimes they are simply the most divided. They are generous, agreeable, patient, and morally articulate. But underneath that polished surface lives an underground world of rage, envy, and exhausted desire. Because they cannot permit these impulses into consciousness, they become exquisitely sensitive to them in others. They can spot selfishness from miles away because selfishness is forbidden territory within themselves. They feel offended by confidence because they have chained their own authority to the floor of the unconscious. What looks like maturity can sometimes be repression wearing elegant clothes, and repression has consequences. What you bury does not become harmless. It becomes autonomous. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is not mystical language. It is psychological fact. The traits you refuse to own begin to choose your relationships, your enemies, your patterns of conflict. You keep meeting the same type of person in different bodies. The manipulator, the narcissist, the dependent, the critic, the coward. You tell yourself the world is filled with them. Maybe it is. But the deeper question is why your psyche is magnetized by these figures, why your emotional life keeps circling the same wound as if it were trying to complete a sentence you keep interrupting. What you hate in others is often what your identity cannot afford to include. The disciplined person may secretly envy chaos because chaos contains freedom. The humble person may be terrified of their own desire to dominate. The one who hates weakness may be haunted by the child in them who was never protected. The one who despises attention-seeking may carry an old grief from never being seen. Hatred often points toward exile. Somewhere in your history, a trait became dangerous. Maybe it threatened love. Maybe it threatened belonging. Maybe it reminded your family of what they could not face in themselves. So you split it off. You learn to become the opposite. And because what is split off still seeks life, you now meet it outside yourself as a threat. This is where moral certainty becomes dangerous. The ego loves absolute categories because they simplify inner conflict. Bad people are arrogant. Good people are humble. Bad people are angry. Good people are calm. Bad people are needy. Good people are self-sufficient. But the psyche does not obey these childish divisions. A person who has never admitted anger is not peaceful. They are often merely disarmed. A person who has never felt envy is not pure. They are often numb. A person who has never confronted their capacity for domination is not safe. They are untested. Jung understood that real development does not come from identifying with goodness, but from bearing the tension of opposites within oneself. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, the path to maturity is not self-admiration, it is self-confrontation. And this confrontation is humiliating. There is no elegant way to discover that your deepest disgust may be hiding a disowned resemblance, to realize that the vanity you mock is connected to your own need for significance, that the deceit you condemn is linked to the half-truths you tell to preserve your image, that the controlling behavior you resent in others mirrors your own quiet manipulations, your own subtle hunger to shape how people see you, need you, stay with you. The ego does not experience this as liberation at first. It experiences it as injury. Because the moment you see the shadow, your innocence begins to fracture. But something else begins there too. Energy returns. The energy that was trapped in judgment, obsession, and resentment starts to move inward, where it can become awareness instead of accusation. You begin to ask better questions. Not, why are they like this? But why does this seize me so completely? Not, how do I prove they are wrong? But what part of me feels exposed in their presence? Not, how do I avoid people like this forever? But what unlived quality in me have they accidentally revealed? This is the first movement of individuation, Jung's term for becoming whole. Not becoming perfect, but becoming less divided. less falsely innocent, less ruled by what you refuse to know. This does not mean surrendering discernment. Some people are cruel, some are manipulative, some are deeply unconscious and leave damage behind them. Jung never asked us to romanticize harm or deny reality. The point is subtler and more difficult. Even when your judgment is correct, your reaction still contains information. The external event may be real, but the inner intensity belongs to you. A person can truly be arrogant, and your hatred of them can still reveal your own wounded relationship with power. A person can truly be dishonest, and your fixation on them can still expose your fear of your own hidden motives. The outer fact does not cancel the inner meaning. Both can be true at once. Once you begin to see this, human relationships become less theatrical and more tragic. You realize how often people are fighting themselves through each other, how often marriages become battlegrounds of mutual projection, each person attacking in the other what they cannot bear in themselves. How often friendships collapse because one person begins to embody the shadow of the other. How often leaders are adored for carrying qualities the crowd has disowned, then hated for the exact same reason. The world is full of these reversals. Worship turns into contempt. Desire turns into disgust. The psyche first seeks its missing pieces, then punishes them for appearing. And perhaps that is why hatred can feel so intimate. It is rarely cold. It has texture, memory, fascination. There is usually something almost unwillingly personal about it, as though the person who disturbs you has crossed an invisible border and entered a room in your psyche you were trying to keep locked. They remind you of what you were not allowed to be, or what you became in order to survive, or what still lives beneath the identity you defend. They do not simply offend your values. They threaten your arrangement with yourself. To live without this insight is to remain a stranger to your own motives. To move through life collecting enemies as mirrors and never once recognizing your own reflection. To be governed by hidden forces while imagining yourself morally transparent. That is the ordinary condition of the ego, certain, reactive, fragmented, hungry for innocence. But the moment you stop treating hatred as proof and start treating it as evidence, the architecture of your inner life begins to change. The people who trigger you become painful teachers. Your contempt becomes a doorway. Your judgments become clues. And the self you have spent years performing begins, slowly and unwillingly, to loosen. What emerges then is not comfort. It is honesty. And honesty is colder, quieter, and far more transformative than inspiration. You begin to see that within you lives not one person, but many. The noble one, the frightened one, the envious one, the loving one, the manipulative one, the abandoned child, the secret tyrant, the silent witness. Maturity is not choosing one and killing the rest. It is learning to recognize the whole inner cast without becoming possessed by any single role. This is why Jung's psychology still unsettles people. It offers no cheap purity. It offers no final performance in which you get to be only the good one. It asks for something rarer, the courage to become real. And the real self is never as flattering as the persona, but it is infinitely more alive. The person who has faced their shadow does not become darker. They become less dangerous, less likely to moralize what they have not mastered, less likely to weaponize virtue against others, less likely to be seduced by the fantasy of innocence. They carry a different kind of strength, one built not on denial, but on contact. They know what lives in them. They know what they are capable of. And because of that, they don't need to hunt fragments of themselves in every passing face. So the next time someone stirs an outsized hatred in you, Resist the temptation to make the story too simple. Yes, see them clearly, but also notice the heat. Notice the fixation. Notice the part of you that feels strangely implicated. Somewhere beneath the judgment, something in you may be asking to be recognized at last. Not approved of, not indulged, but brought into consciousness. Because what you refuse to meet within yourself does not vanish. It waits in the world, wearing the voices of other people, until your own soul becomes unbearable enough to hear. And sometimes, the face you cannot stand is not the face of your enemy. It is the face of a truth that has been following you for years, asking in silence to be let in. Thank you for being part of Intelligence Wisdom. If something here stayed with you, don't ignore it. Sit with it. And if you want to keep exploring the deeper layers of the mind, consider subscribing.